Good evening and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD. Here's what's coming up tonight. President Trump taking executive action on what he calls Liberation Day. Communist China at the top of the list as Trump rolls out reciprocal tariffs on the countries he calls the worst offenders of fair trade. How the tariffs will impact foreign nations and industries here in the U.S. And how do the tariffs play into President Trump's overall plan to balance trade and make America wealthy? We'll hear insights from Republican Georgia Congressman Buddy Carter. House Republicans now have more wiggle room, their slim majority expanded by 2. This after victories in Florida's special elections last night.
This is Capitol Report, live from our global headquarters in our nation's capital. Here's Steve Lance.
I'm Melina Weisskopf standing in for Steve Lance tonight. President Trump announcing reciprocal tariffs that aim to target countries he calls the worst offenders of fair trade, like Communist China. How will different countries be impacted, and why is the president declaring a national emergency? Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent, Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. Tell us more about the major announcement from the Rose Garden.
Good evening to you, Melina. So today, President Trump declaring a national emergency announced a 10% baseline tariffs on all countries going into effect on April 5th. And that's in addition to what he calls reciprocal tariffs on countries that the White House calls the worst offenders of fair trade to the U.S. And that will go into effect on April 9th. Specifically, Trump calls today's a very important day in American history, and this move an important moment declaring America's economic independence.
This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, in American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper.
And specifically on reciprocal tariffs, what it means is that the U.S. will charge what other countries are charging the U.S. when it comes to not only tariffs, but also non-tariff trade barriers. But President Trump says he's being nice in cutting that amount in half. For example, he points to the top of his list, which is China, because China is effectively charging U.S. a 67% in tariffs, and Trump is charging China now an additional 34% in tariffs. And Trump says that's to protect America's national security, both by reducing reliance on countries like China and also countering China's unfair practices. Watch.
A single shipyard in China now produces more ships every year than all of the American shipyards combined. Think of that. And it was a business that we used to dominate. We used to dominate it totally. In short, chronic trade deficits are no longer merely an economic problem. They're a national emergency that threatens our security and our very way of life.
And also, a White House official confirmed to NTD that today's reciprocal tariffs will be on top of existing tariffs. And that means that, for example, President Trump has already hiked his tariffs on China to 20% because of its role in allowing fentanyl to go into the U.S. But now, with the additional 34% in reciprocal tariffs, China will now face a 54% of tariffs from the U.S. Melina.
Iris, in addition to countering unfair trade practices, what are some of the other expected impacts of this?
Sure. So President Trump says one of his biggest goals is, of course, to bring jobs and manufacturers and companies back to the U.S. And that's the impact that he expects today's tariffs will have. But he also is calling on countries and leaders who might be trying to negotiate a way out of this to just drop their trade barriers. Watch.
Likewise to all of the foreign presidents, prime ministers, kings, queens, ambassadors, and everyone else who will soon be calling to ask for exemptions from these tariffs, I say, terminate your own tariffs, drop your barriers, don't manipulate your currencies. They manipulate.
And some economists were predicting that higher tariffs announced today will lead to higher prices for American consumers. But President Trump pushed back against those predictions, saying that, look, at his first term, he also imposed higher tariffs, but the result was overall positive. He says both media outlets and economists should look at what happened in the past to predict what's going to happen next, because last time they were proven wrong. Melina.
Iris Tao reporting to us from the White House. Thank you so much for this update tonight. A deadline is approaching for a new TikTok ownership. The app has until April 5th to find an American buyer, or else it could be banned from the U.S. market. Bidders are reportedly throwing their hats into the ring. Amazon stocks went up about 2% following reports of a possible TikTok bid. Having an in-house social media platform is a long-standing ambition of the company. If the news is true, Amazon isn't the only one who's interested in the purchase. President Trump last month said his team was talking with 4 different groups about the sale of TikTok, but he did not identify which groups were involved. Since last year, TikTok's fate has been hanging in the balance. Congress demanded the platform divest from its Chinese parent company, ByteDance. Officials expressed national security concerns over TikTok's ties to the Chinese Communist Party. They say the platform could serve as a Trojan horse to transfer American user data to Beijing. The original deadline was set for January 19th, but Trump extended it until April 5th. And moving on to Congress, Senate Democrats are working to reverse President Trump's fentanyl emergency tariffs on Canada, while House Democrats are offering mixed reactions to the administration's so-called Liberation Day. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on this story.
It's estimated that the average American family will pay more than $5,000 out of their pocket to pay for these tariffs. That these tariffs will cost them $5,000 as the prices of everything goes up.
Senate Democrats are pushing to vote on a resolution that would reverse the tariffs that Trump levied on Canada using the fentanyl emergency declaration. Republican Senator Rand Paul is an original co-sponsor of the resolution, and Senate Democrats hope to put Republicans on the record on tariffs.
Canadian tariffs are not the answer to the solution, because the fentanyl problem is not primarily a Canadian problem. But this is not about fentanyl. It's about tariffs. It's about a national sales tax on American families.
President Trump has already said he would not sign the resolution if it reached his desk, and House Democrats are divided over tariffs.
America is too expensive. Donald Trump and House Republicans aren't doing anything about the affordability crisis in the United States of America.
The auto workers are concerned about, or unions in general, potential increased costs. But quite frankly, they're not unhappy to see someone doing something about trade, bringing those jobs home, bringing the supply chains back home.
House Republicans have brushed off criticism against Trump tariff policies and have remained united.
Let's go back to his first administration. There was the same type of talk about tariffs. The Biden administration didn't change virtually anything associated with the tariff policy of Donald Trump. The president is making sure is that we have manufacturing in our country, that we actually have domestic supplies in our country, that people actually have high-paying jobs, as opposed to just onshoring everything from Asia, which, if you go back to COVID-19, was not in the best interest of the United States.
On a Truth Social post, President Trump called out by name 4 Republican senators who have shown opposition to his tariff plans by saying that Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, Susan Collins of Maine, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and Rand Paul of also Kentucky will hopefully get on the Republican bandwagon for a change and fight the Democrats' wild and flagrant push to not penalize Canada. It's important to note that the Senate is expected to vote on a new budget resolution and instructions for a reconciliation bill this week. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
How will the budget battle between the House and Senate play out, and how are President Trump's tariffs resonating with Americans? To break it down, we're joined by Georgia Congressman Buddy Carter. Congressman Buddy Carter of Georgia. Congressman, with President Trump's tariffs taking effect today, I want to know, first of all, how are your constituents reacting to these tariffs?
Well, obviously, there's a lot of caution, and they are somewhat concerned. But at the same time, everyone understands that this is long-term. This is a long-term play. This is something that's been going on for way too long. And the longer you let something like this go on, the more difficult it is to address it. I mean, let's face it, 25% tariffs on cars. I'm sure you've traveled abroad. A lot of us have. And whenever you travel abroad, do you see as many American cars on foreign roads as you see foreign cars on American roads? No, you don't. The reason is because these other countries are protecting their industries. And we only want a fair playing field. That's all the president is asking for here. Tariffs are a tool in his tool chest to make sure that we have fair wages here in America, to make sure that we have a level playing field.
Congressman, there's also a lot of controversy around how it will impact the economy. Trump says the new tariffs will will balance global trade and make America wealthy. How do you think these tariffs will fulfill that?
Well, obviously, it's going to bring in more revenue, and we'll see how long this lasts. Again, I think it's a tool in the president's tool chest, and that, he's going to be using it to level the playing field, to get our competitors' attention, and to let them know that we're just not going to put up with this anymore. We're not going to let them destroy the American workers' salaries and by subsidizing their own industries. That's not a level playing field. That's all we're asking for here. I'm convinced, and I would submit to you, that American worker can compete with any other worker in the world, but we have to have a level playing field in order to do that.
Not everybody's on board here. What would you say to Americans who are concerned about the uncertainty that these tariffs may create, particularly when it comes to prices and inflation?
Well, I think that they need to understand that this is something, again, that has been going on for a long time. And when you let something go on for a long time and ignore it, it's harder to address it. But this is for the long term. This is a long-term move here that will pay dividends. Yes, there probably will be some pain in the short term, but it'll be offset by the gains that we make in the long term.
Now let's turn now to the budget. So you all are working on the budget resolution there. What are you hoping to see in the final budget resolution?
Well, we are hoping for one big, beautiful bill, and that's very important. If we don't extend these tax cuts, we're going to be looking at 80% of Americans facing the highest tax increase they've ever seen. And we can ill afford to let that happen at a time when our economy is just recovering from the 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration. And that's important. We need to make sure that we do extend these tax cuts. We need to make sure that the president's able to fulfill his obligations and his promises that he made and was overwhelmingly elected on. That is, of unleashing American energy, of keeping and making inflation and getting it down, and making sure that we are putting America first. All of those things can be accomplished by passing one big, beautiful bill and extending these tax cuts.
And now with the work that DOJ is doing, it seems like the idea of slashing around $1.5 trillion in federal spending is gaining some traction. Congressman, do you think it's realistic to reach that goal?
I do. I'm very confident that we can do that. I'm a member of the Budget Committee, and I'm very proud of the product that we put out and the resolution that was passed out of the Budget Committee, that was passed out of the House, and is over in the Senate now. And I hope that the Senate will take this up. I know that they've been quite busy with the confirmations and all the responsibilities that they have. But at the same time, we need to get to work. We need to know what the final numbers are going to be. And that way we can address this. And I'm very confident that we can make some substantial cuts and some substantial savings that will result in a better life and for Americans in this country.
Do you expect leadership to continue to push for the aggressive cuts that you all are seeking?
I do. Obviously, we're going to have a compromise. There's no question about that. We always do. But at the same time, I think that most of our conference and the great majority of our conference realizes that there is a lot of savings that can be had in our budget, that there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. There's a lot of things that we can do that will result in making sure that our economy is heading in the right direction and making sure that we're not adding to our already unsustainable debt. The debt is just like the tariffs and just like the unfair trade practices. The longer we put it off, the more difficult it is to address. And that's why we need to address it now.
And now the Senate is having a goal this week to pass the budget resolution. Are you confident that they'll be able to do that? And how much do you think that their version will align with your version over in the House?
Well, I'm encouraged that the Senate has indicated that they're going to get us a product in the next week, hopefully, and then we can start conferencing and come to a compromise on what exactly we're going to do. And as I say, the budget resolution that we passed for reconciliation, I think is a good product and certainly a good starting point, but we need to know the final numbers so that we can go ahead and start addressing this. That's going to be extremely important.
What do you think the end game is for senators trying to push their own agenda here and what we've seen so far with this friction that we've seen between the House and the Senate? And what do you see as the end game here?
Well, I would agree with the Speaker that we are aligned, the House and the Senate Republicans, and that we understand the importance of making sure that we don't have the largest tax increase that Americans have ever seen. That is our ultimate goal. Now, we may have different ways in which we want to get there, but our ultimate goal is to put America first and to make sure that the largest tax increase ever does not happen in this country. And I'm very confident that we can get that done between the House and the Senate.
Thank you so much for your time, Congressman. Great to have you on.
Thank you.
The GOP's slim majority in the House has expanded by a small margin. House Republicans tonight swore in 2 additional members to the lower chamber. This comes after Florida Republicans secured victories in 2 hotly contested special elections last night. The races filled empty seats left by former Congressman Matt Gaetz and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. State Senator Randy Fine edged out his Democratic opponent, Josh Weil, in the 6th Congressional District. Meanwhile, Chief Financial Officer Jimmy Patronis defeated Gay Valamond in the 1st District. Both candidates won by a significantly smaller margin compared to their predecessors. And on the other side of the aisle, Democrats poured millions of dollars into the races, hoping to chip away at Republicans' razor-thin majority in the House. With Fine and Patronis already sworn in, the GOP now has a majority of 220 seats compared to Democrats' 213 seats. This will give the party more breathing room on key initiatives that they're working through. The historic corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams has been dismissed with prejudice, meaning the case can't be brought back. NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards has more on why the court declined to dismiss it the way the Justice Department requested.
District Court Judge Dale Ho on Wednesday issued a lengthy opinion permanently dismissing a 5-count indictment against Mayor Eric Adams. The indictment, which included bribery and fraud, was brought last September. Adams had pleaded not guilty.
I know I am innocent.
Judge Ho declined to dismiss the case without prejudice as requested by the Trump administration. He said in his order, DOJ does not seek to end this case once and for all. Rather, its request, if granted, would leave Mayor Adams under the specter of re-indictment at essentially any time, and for essentially any reason. The court declines in its limited discretion under Rule 48A to endorse that outcome. Mayor Adams responded to the dismissal.
Today finally marks the end of this chapter. Let me be clear. As I've said all along, this case should have never been brought. And I did nothing wrong.
A spokesperson for the DOJ told Politico the case is an example of political weaponization and a waste of resources. Judge Ho said that under the Justice Department's request, the mayor's freedom seemed to depend on him carrying out the Trump administration's immigration policies. The Justice Department had argued that continuing the proceedings would interfere with the mayor's ability to govern. They said it could threaten federal immigration policies. On Monday, Adams' attorney submitted a letter alerting the judge that his petition for candidacy for mayor was due on Thursday and asked the court to promptly reach a decision. Adams faces a large field of challengers, including former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who holds a wide lead, and several Democrats. The incumbent mayor's challengers have been saying New Yorkers can no longer trust him to prioritize their interests, arguing that he's too indebted to Trump. Adams has said he will always put this city first. Judge Ho's decision does not address the merits of the charges. He said his decision is not about whether Mayor Adams is innocent or guilty. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And coming up next, what could we expect from President Trump's global tariffs? Spencer Morrison and Frances Stacy will be joining us live to discuss the economic impacts.
At Mathis Home, we understand that your home is a reflection of you. And during our spring style event, we have fresh new looks that are waiting to make your home look and feel great at the lowest prices. And with all the latest styles in bloom, you'll find savings in every department. Whether it's a clean and modern sectional or a rustic and traditional dining table, we have it in stock with fast and free delivery. Come find the look that's right for you at our spring style event at your furniture superstore, Mathis Home.
Hi, Mike Huckabee here. Having spent many years in politics, I can comfortably say that the current climate is enough to keep any of us awake at night. And I safeguard my well-being by making sure that I get a good night's rest with Relaxium Sleep, America's #1 trusted sleep aid.
I'm Dr. Eric Siliberti, founder of Relaxium, America's most trusted sleep aid.
Just like you're seeing me on television now, I saw a commercial for Relaxium Sleep back then. I called, and the rest is history.
When I take Relaxium Sleep, I sleep better than I have in years.
I wake up feeling like I've had the best night's sleep.
As a clinical neurologist, I know how essential sleep is for building and nourishing both your mental and physical health.
Relaxium Sleep is made in the USA, has no risk of dependency, and is drug-free. It's also the only sleep aid with Valarest as part of its triple action formula.
I developed Relaxium to help my patients fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and wake up refreshed.
Relaxium Sleep worked from the very first night I took it.
You've got to try Relaxium Sleep for yourself, because once you do, you'll be a customer for life, just like me. And right now, you can try it for free.
For nearly 2 decades now, Relaxium Sleep has been changing millions of lives.
Take Relaxium Sleep. I promise you it'll work.
If you're experiencing sleepless nights or tossing and turning, you need to try Relaxium Sleep now.
I trust Relaxium Sleep, and so should you. Get the best night of sleep guaranteed. Don't wait another minute. Call now.
Mike Huckabee is so confident that Relaxium Sleep will work for you, he's asked us to give away another 1,000 bottles. Get your free bottle of Relaxium Sleep now. Visit tryrelaxium.com or call 800-418-1606. That's tryrelaxium.com or call 800-418-1606.
What has lasted 5,000 years was once almost lost. Now, the world awaits the divine culture's return. Shenyang.
Welcome back. You're watching the Capitol Report. Just hours ago, President Trump unveiled sweeping reciprocal tariffs on imported goods from dozens of countries. So how does the rollout impact global trade and America's private sector? Joining us now live is Spencer Morrison, author of Reshore, How Tariffs Will Bring Our Jobs Home, and Frances Stacy, economic strategist and wealth manager for Scarlet Oak Financial. Thank you both for joining us so much. Let's take a moment and just listen to a clip of what President Trump said today. Of course, he's calling today Liberation Day. Just listen to him for just a moment. I want to get both of your reactions.
April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again.
So President Trump, of course, is imposing a minimum baseline tariff of 10% on all products coming into the U.S. Frances, we'll start with you. What kind of ripple effect should we anticipate in the private sector?
Well, we have a couple of things going on with the private sector. So first, we have the market reaction. Futures are selling off. This was more and broader based than the markets were pricing in. And so you see those futures selling off. And then the other thing is that they mentioned that a lot of tech companies would be spending a lot of money in the U.S. I think he said $500 billion for Meta. So that's going to go into the balance sheet calculation that's going to come up when the earnings calls. The one thing, though, that the administration definitely has going for them is Scott Bessent said that we have a bad equilibrium. The top 10% in America spend 40 to 50% of the American consumerism for goods and services. So a market sell-off in the short term, those top 10% are not going to slow down their spending. That increases Trump's leverage with consumerism. And as the market sells off, it liquefies the bond market. So that's an important point. It will take a minute for these tariffs to recalibrate, but in the old model with the public spending, drunk on public spending, half of America was left behind, and that's what he's addressing.
Spencer, what are your thoughts specifically about the private sector and also your thoughts about what Trump has said himself about the possibility for short-term pain?
I mean, short-term pain and economic dislocation is a given anytime you have significant policy shifts. And this is a seismic shift. For the last 50 years, America has been on an experiment of economic globalization and so-called free trade. And what we've seen is the offshoring and the hollowing out of America's industries. We've lost 6 million manufacturing jobs. We've lost about 12 million jobs in the service industry that were predicated on those jobs. Tens of millions of people have left the labor force. They're not even looking for work anymore. So, yeah, there'll be some short-term pain, but at the end of the day, who cares? We don't worship the golden calf. Money's not God. Economic growth isn't our teleological justification as a people and as a nation. The means to an end. It's not the end itself. The economy has to serve the American people. It has to serve our security, our well-being, and our future for our children and our grandchildren. And all this short-term thinking that's left us high and dry needs to stop. We need to be looking at this 50, 100 years down the road, and that's what President Trump is doing.
And while these reciprocal tariffs are set to be in place, of course, for dozens of countries, China is on the top of the list. Let's listen together about what the president said about tariffs on Chinese products.
China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset?
House has confirmed that the 34% is in addition to the 20% that was already in place. We've seen reports of China circumventing U.S. tariffs by rerouting products through other countries like Vietnam and Mexico. How should that be tackled, Frances?
Well, the thing is he's got multi-dimensional chess going on here, because really what's happening with China is they've gotten an increasingly larger percentage of global GDP through us outsourcing the manufacturing base. And I completely agree with Spencer. You have to reinvigorate the lower half of Americans, because the thing that you really have is that those people are living paycheck to paycheck. And if they start suddenly defaulting on the record amount of credit card debt in the system, we could really have a credit crisis. We have about 3 years left until Ray Dalio has calculated that we will not have demand in our U.S. debt market. So circling back to China and the BRICS countries were gaining leverage to try and challenge the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. Trump has threatened via Truth Social that he would raise tariffs to 100% to anybody who was trying to threaten the U.S. dollar. But it is about the share of global GDP. He feels that China has been very unfair to Americans. They've stolen our IP. We've built up their manufacturing base. And so he is definitely thinking in the longer term of trying to take the share of global GDP from China and put it back to the U.S. because they rely on the U.S. consumer.
Spencer, your thoughts on what Frances just said. Also, do you think the measure today does address China's unfair trade practices?
Yeah, Frances is correct. I mean, China has got incredibly fat and happy and rich, piggybacking their economy and their manufacturing off of America's market. I mean, if you look at purchasing power parity, about the industrial output between the two countries, America used to be the factory of the world. At the end of World War II, we produced 50% of everything that was made on planet Earth. Today, China produces 3 times as much as us. We produce $5.5 trillion. They produce almost $16 trillion worth of industrial output. It's not even close. And they did that in the space of 40 years, in particular after 2001 when they joined the World Trade Organization. 20 years, they've eclipsed us. In really short order. Like it's actually, there's never been a shift in all of human history that was this seismic and this rapid and this consequential. And I think, to answer your question, President Trump's tariffs are addressing this issue in a way that it has never been addressed by any administration in the modern era.
Let's talk for a moment about the tariffs on imported vehicles. So, of course, as expected, today's wide-ranging measure includes 25% tariffs on all imported vehicles and auto components. This decision garnered support from the head of the United Auto Workers Union, who's previously been critical of Trump for some time. What's your take on his shift in position, Frances?
Well, he, basically wants to give America that leverage. He wants to increase the jobs. He wants to reinstill the manufacturing base. He wants the lower half of Americans to have access to jobs via the private sector. The problem with having the, government spending, be about 40% of our GDP as it was last year, and the private sector of small businesses only being 43% of our GDP, is that, with the upper 40% who own assets, their stocks and their house prices and things are going up, as their egg prices are going up. And the problem with the lower 60%, the manufacturing base that we've lost to China, is that their egg prices are going up. They don't have assets that are going up. And so definitely the auto industry is one of the biggest things in America. And by fortifying that, the other thing is that, it is really that top 10% who buys those luxury vehicles. And it seems like those foreign luxury vehicles are going to get hit hardest by this. Many of those people have so much money. I don't know that a price increase is going to, damage their demand.
Spencer, your thoughts on the auto industry?
What I want to pick up on something Frances said rather than the auto industry. People don't understand how the trade deficit works, okay? We don't get something for nothing in this world. You got to pay for it. And we've been running a trade deficit every year since 1974. We've shelled out over $25 trillion during that period when you adjust it for inflation. And the question is, we weren't trading for it. So what were we giving in consideration? Well, we were selling our assets and we were selling debt. Okay, $25 trillion worth of American real estate, agricultural land, houses, farms, ownership of American companies, and the national public debt. So this is what we've traded in order to get these so-called cheap goods. So tying it back to what Frances said, she said, the top 10% of people, they're not really affected by this because they've got houses, they have capital. Well, the reason for that is because those assets have been grossly inflated by all of the money that have been poured out to pay for the trade deficit, right? We give them American dollars in exchange for goods, and then they spend those goods on our houses and our assets. So the very people who are complaining that the trade deficit is going to hurt their quality of life, yeah, it will, because the bubble is going to burst for them. But you know what? The majority of Americans have been paying for that for 50 years. They've been left high and dry, and they've been pitted against the financial interests of this nation. So what President Trump is doing is he's saying, look, we're not serving the god of finance. We're going to serve the American people, and the American people need jobs. They need products. They need they don't need appreciating asset bubbles, right?
And lastly, here we often hear the phrase revitalizing domestic manufacturing. How much How much untapped potential is there, and do you think that this direction is going to take us in a route that will revive that domestic manufacturing? Whoever has any pressing thoughts on this?
No, I want to jump in and just say I agree with Spencer. I mean, in the early 90s, our trade deficit was $81 billion, and we reached a trade deficit last year of $1.2 trillion. And so exactly what he's saying is correct, and it's not sustainable. We are going to head off of a debt cliff. We have got to pay these debts and deficits, and he wants to lower taxes because Americans are suffering with credit card debt and other onerous things, and he wants to lower taxes so that the taxpayers are not killed to reconcile the debt and deficits, and we get the tariff revenue in its place.
All right, fascinating insights. Spencer Morrison and Frances Stacy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much.
And Medicaid funding in the courts. The Supreme Court today heard arguments on whether South Carolina can cut off Medicaid funding to Planned Parenthood. The dispute centers on whether Medicaid patients can sue to ensure access to any qualified provider. A Planned Parenthood affiliate filed suit after Governor Henry McMaster moved to block its Medicaid funding. Lower courts ruled in its favor. The Supreme Court decision, expected by June, could set a major precedent. South Carolina currently bans abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. And coming up next, members of Congress question former FBI agents to see how they can help restore the public's trust. Could cyber attacks from China foreshadow something more serious? Lawmakers probed the Chinese regime's recent espionage operations on U.S. officials and what they mean for national security. Republican Texas Congressman Keith Self weighs in on the evidence of censorship of Americans' voices. That and more when we return.
Looking for a healthy and smooth-tasting brew? Drop by Days Coffee Roasters today and explore our wide selection of specialty-grade, small-batch roasted coffee. Home to North America's first enzyme-fermented coffee, we source a wide selection of specialty-grade coffee beans from around the world, and our baristas are ready to craft your customized brew. Visit Days Coffee at 28 North Street, Middletown, New York. Come experience a brew like no other.
Hi friends, Richard Karn here. Now I'm known as the guy who can fix just about anything, but the technology in most appliances requires very special training to fix. My point is, even I know when I've met my match, and that's why my family has Choice Home Warranty. So we won't get stuck with high-priced repairs.
Choice Home Warranty covers over 25 major home systems and appliances. That's your AC, heating, plumbing, kitchen and laundry appliances, and so much more.
Imagine for less than a cup of coffee a day, Choice Home Warranty can help protect you from expensive major system and appliance breakdowns that your homeowner's insurance doesn't cover. But you have to call now before it's too late.
Every homeowner should have Choice Home Warranty. Your homeowner's insurance is not going to cover your appliances.
Washing machine, dryer, refrigerator, air condition. If I had any issues arise, they were able to take care of it immediately.
Now, homeowner's insurance won't protect you when your home's major systems and appliances break down due to normal wear and tear. But Choice Home Warranty will. They can help cover repairs and replacements.
Choice Home Warranty is the best warranty we've ever used. It would save you so much money in the long run.
Hey, I'm not the only one raving about Choice Home Warranty. They were named a Best Home Warranty Company and Best Claim Service by U.S. News 360 Reviews.
Call Choice Home Warranty now and get access to a nationwide network of over 15,000 technicians and the latest appointment setting technology so you'll know when they're on their way.
If I have an issue with an appliance or something around the house, I just call up Choice Home Warranty and I don't have to worry about that.
So, do what this old DIYer did and call Choice Home Warranty now before something breaks down. Tell them I sent you and get your first month free.
Call Choice Home Warranty before it's too late and get protection for your heating, AC, plumbing, kitchen and laundry appliances, and more. Call for your free quote today. Call in the next 5 minutes and get your first month free. 800-360-6782. 800-360-6782.
Eyes forward. Don't drive distracted.
Restoring Americans' confidence in the FBI. That was the subject of a House hearing today. Former FBI agents testified on how the Bureau could move forward. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
Republican members of the House Judiciary Oversight Subcommittee expressed concern about the way the FBI was heading under the previous presidential administration.
The FBI spent over $6 billion, not million, $billion on intelligence, counterintelligence, and countering terrorism. But instead of using those billions to fight violent crime or keep our communities safe, the money was funneled into politically driven investigations and abuses of power.
Our colleagues on the other side want to encourage us to move on from a federal government that was weaponized against the American people that they are supposed to represent.
4 former FBI agents were invited as expert witnesses to answer questions from the representatives.
While extremely demanding, my pursuit of justice for all never once gave me reason for pause until I witnessed social, cultural, and political agendas enter the FBI mission to the point it impacted our ability to effectively do the job the public and our responsibilities demand.
Our intent is to not harm the Bureau, but to restore it. The stories and data we've brought forward represent deeply ingrained issues, repeatedly experienced by dedicated professionals. Our goal is not retribution, but responsibility. We must rebuild the Bureau's integrity and reorient to serve the American people, not internal politics.
Ranking Member Crockett had some concerns about some operations that are occurring under the current FBI director.
Patel and Trump-backed FBI leadership have redirected FBI agents who are working on investigations involving violent crimes against children and child exploitation and transferred them to work on anti-Tesla attacks and redacting Jeffrey Epstein files. Talk about FBI waste and abuse.
And one question came up several times during the hearing.
How do we restore credibility in these agencies?
One witness gave several recommendations to the subcommittee, including having the FBI make hiring choices based solely on merit and have Congress create new criminal penalties for FBI employees who knowingly abuse the FBI's investigative powers and drastically reduce the size of the FBI headquarters.
Keeping a small footprint in D.C. to promote accountability while shifting more staff and resources to the field offices and other locations outside the Beltway.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Lawmakers are expressing concern that the Chinese regime's cyber attacks against U.S. telecommunications companies like AT&T and Verizon could lead to even more serious security breaches. On Capitol Hill today, a House committee examined the potential consequences if the U.S. doesn't stand up to China's cyber aggression. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
The Chinese Communist Party and their military intelligence apparatus are already in a footing that we would describe as a wartime footing. They use that language deliberately to deceive us and to make us think, oh, everything's okay, we can just sort of be friends. They do this while hacking us blatantly, while then denying when they get confronted.
Recent cyber attacks from China targeting the U.S. are becoming an increasing threat. The House Oversight's Military and Foreign Affairs Subcommittee probed the impact of the recent Salt Typhoon attacks. Now, this was a Chinese Communist Party operation to spy on calls and text messages of users of AT&T and Verizon. Now, this operation is believed to have targeted President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance while they were on the campaign trail and other U.S. government officials.
They were able to intercept real-time calls and messaging data from over 1 million users. Critically, these attacks focused on gathering intelligence from high-value government and political figures.
I would say Salt Typhoon is one of the worst breaches our country has ever faced in our telecom infrastructure, and we're still uncovering the full breadth and scope of its attacks.
One panelist says that these attacks occurred because the U.S. requires these companies to have a backdoor into their systems so that law enforcement can access their phone data, but this has allowed U.S. adversaries to access people's calls and texts.
Adding mandated backdoors into the equation essentially, preloads the bugs. We don't even have to find them. We know they're there already.
And these espionage hacks may only be the beginning.
It's as if we were driving on a road hitting a bunch of potholes, and then you ask us to come and talk about the potholes. We don't want to ignore the potholes, but it's scarier when there's gigantic sinkholes ahead of us. And I think we'll look back on Salt Typhoon as perhaps child's play.
Meanwhile, many House Democrats brought up security concerns about the recently leaked Signal chat from members of the Trump administration discussing an attack against terrorists in Yemen.
It is pointless for us to sit in this committee and try to grapple with the real issue of Salt Typhoon and other threats to our communication systems if the people at the top don't take it seriously.
The panel suggests rebuilding cyber infrastructure to make it more secure and changing policies to prevent backdoor access to telecommunications. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
A new bipartisan bill in the House aims to counter Communist China's efforts to isolate Taiwan from the international community. It's called the Taiwan International Solidarity Act. The bill strengthens existing legislation signed into law during President Trump's first administration in 2020. Beijing often uses a 1971 UN resolution to claim it has sovereignty over Taiwan, despite never having ruled the island. The bill would instruct U.S. representatives in international organizations to resist the Chinese regime's distortion campaign. It would also require the Secretary of State to report to Congress about Beijing's efforts to undermine Taiwan's international relationships and activities. One of the bill's co-sponsors, Republican Congresswoman Young Kim, introduced a second bill last week that would boost America's economic and trade ties with Taiwan. And a House subcommittee explores how the now defunct Global Engagement Center under the State Department censored Americans' voices. Joining me now to discuss the insights from the hearing is Republican Texas Congressman Keith Self. Congressman Keith Self, thank you for joining us today. I want to first talk about Trump's first month back in office. So the FCC Chairman Brendan Carr ordered an investigation into NPR and PBS. Of course, you all had that hearing last week. We know that those news media outlets receive taxpayer funding. How likely are we to see Congress end federal funding for public programming?
Well, I certainly hope we're going to see it because we don't have any business in it, and they serve only the progressive left policy. So let's see what we can do about it. I'm very hopeful.
What kind of action would you support? Would you rather see this in like a standalone bill, or would you rather see it as part of the budget reconciliation bill you all are working on?
I'd like to see it as part of the reconciliation because we want, in the House, we want to see as much in there as possible. So yeah, I'd love to see it in reconciliation because it just helps our numbers in the spending cut side.
Okay, and now let's move on to Foreign Affairs. So the Foreign Affairs Committee is holding a hearing on censorship today. It's called The Need for First Amendment Safeguards at the State Department. I want to play you a clip and get your reaction. Listen in.
The GEC was initially authorized for the statutory purpose of countering foreign propaganda and disinformation efforts. The GEC instead deployed its shadowy network of grantees and sub-grantees to facilitate the censorship of American voices, especially if those voices were conservative and refused to align with the left-leaning establishment politics.
Congressman Self, how much evidence do you think there is that GEC engaged in censorship of U.S. voices?
Oh, I think there's quite a bit. All you've got to do is go back and look at what they talked about, as well as the grants. I don't think there's any doubt, as I pointed out in the hearing, the Hunter Biden laptop is probably the best example we could come up with, although there are many more. They lied about it and lied about it. And I think they kind of took the position that a lie told often enough will become truth. It won't. And frankly, that's the best example that over time, truth will out. And now we know that it was a conspiracy that was run on the Hunter Biden laptop. We now know the truth. So yeah, there's plenty of evidence.
This is sort of a complex issue, though. Congressman, do you think there's a way to solve the issue with GEC while also maintaining its original purpose to counter foreign propaganda?
Yeah, there are safeguards that we need to put in it to make sure, much like some other programs that we've had problems with, a FISA court, for instance, safeguards must be there that we protect American citizens, and we protect American citizens' right to free speech. So the safeguards can be put in and should be put in because we also need to keep tabs on our adversaries. But absolutely, safeguards are absolutely necessary.
Now, from you attending the hearing today, what is your takeaways from Democrats' overall response to these allegations? How should we understand freedom of speech in this case?
Freedom of speech for Americans is sacrosanct. It is one of the 5 freedoms in the very First Amendment. It's in the First Amendment for a reason. Those 5 were considered the most important, and that's one of them. So once we take that as principle, then we put the safeguards in to make sure that it stays sacrosanct.
Okay, now turning to China, Congressman, let's listen to another clip from a hearing today.
The PRC has invested billions in pumping out propaganda, weaponizing the world's largest online disinformation operation to silence critics, discredit lawmakers, and harass U.S. companies who are at odds with China's interests.
From what you just heard, Congressman, what does this say about the scope of China's global information strategy?
Well, we know it's huge. We know we get bombarded every single day, both from Russia and China, every single day. So it is huge. That's what we need to protect against, rather than worrying about Americans' free speech or trying to monitor Americans' free speech. We need to be focused on the horrendous, the huge China effort to influence around the world. They're serious about it. We need to be just as serious in defending against it.
And on that note, a newly leaked database, Congressman, shows that China is developing a large language model system designed to automatically detect and suppress politically sensitive content. How do you see this technology being used, and do you think it could affect global cybersecurity?
Well, absolutely. AI is going to influence everything. That's why we need to stay ahead of them. We're still ahead of them. People estimate maybe 2 years. So just as they're going to use artificial intelligence, we need to use it against them as well, not only to protect, but in the offense. So this is a growing area because cybersecurity, once AI gets into it, it's going to move fast. So we want to protect, and I think we want to go on the offense as well against their propaganda.
Okay, Congressman Keith Self, great to have you on today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And coming up, international leaders react to Trump's sweeping new tariffs. Find out how Canada, Mexico, Europe, and the UK are reacting.
Heavenly beauty unfolds on stage. A lost civilization revived. Experience China's 5,000 years of wonder before communism. Breathtaking, inspiring. See it at least once in your lifetime.
Shen Yun coming to Lincoln Center March 26th to April 13th. Buy tickets now at shenyun.com.
The bladder control aisle. You won't shop here again. Your private business is your own. The constant struggle is over. Now there's a better way. It's HDIS. We home deliver bladder control products. We understand how you feel. For over 25 years, we've home delivered to many of the 20 million Americans who deal with incontinence. We offer all brands. We pay shipping and use plain, unmarked boxes. If we can help you or someone you care for, call for your free product sample pack and $45 in money-saving coupons. Our counselors will help you choose the right product. And unlike stores, we're always in stock. You'll get what you need. Satisfaction guaranteed. HDIS, the better way.
For your free sample pack with your free catalog, $45 in money-saving coupons, and free product samples, call 1-800-701-6159. That's 1-800-701-6159.
I hear every day about the products you all wish MyPillow carried. Well, guess what? We probably do. Slippers, bathrobes, pet beds, blankets, mattresses, sleepwear, loungewear, duvets, comforters, pot holders, aprons, oven mitts, and so much more. And they're all on sale. For example, get our best-selling standard MyPillows for only $14.98. Body pillows, $29.98. 6-piece bath towels or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And I've never done this before. When you spend $100 or more, you're going to get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
Kids love it. Parents trust it. Obviously. Explore GJW Plus Kids Series and Ganjian Campus courses led by expert educators. This is spectacular. Children will learn values like respect, responsibility, and knowledge in language, science, and more. Wow. All while having fun. Perfect. Subscribe today at GJW Plus Kids, where learning meets fun.
Countries from around the world reacting to President Trump's proposed tariffs. Leaders from various nations offer insights into how they plan to respond. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has what countries over the world are planning to do.
President Trump is in the process of trying to fundamentally restructure the U.S. economy, and that means that our economy here needs to change dramatically as well.
Canada's Prime Minister on Wednesday, saying Canada will be, quote, very deliberate in its countermeasures if the U.S. proceeds with tariffs proposed by President Trump. Mexico, meanwhile, planning to take a different approach.
We do not believe in an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, because that always leads to a bad situation.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says she'll announce a comprehensive program on Thursday, but not a tit-for-tat response. It's not clear how the European Union plans to react, but a response is expected soon.
On our response,
All I can say is that there will be one. It will happen at the appropriate moment after the expected announcement.
And the UK, which is of course not a member of the EU anymore, will take a pragmatic approach. That's according to Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
We have a good deal of trade, a balanced trade relationship with the US, and I believe that our interests are best served by calmly trying to secure a deal which is in our national interest.
Australia's Prime Minister says he'll continue to stand up for his country. More responses could come from Taiwan, South Korea, China and others. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
And before we end the show for the night, a surprise appearance. Here's Education Secretary Linda McMahon crashing a Democratic press conference earlier today.
I believe, and I know the president does believe this as well, the best education is that is closest to the child, where teachers and parents, local superintendents working together and local school boards to develop the curriculum for those students is the best way that it can happen.
McMahon did not answer a question about when she will shut down the department. Earlier, she met with roughly a dozen Democrats to discuss their concerns about recent layoffs at the Education Department. And when she showed up at the press conference, Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury invited the secretary to the podium to deliver some remarks. That looks like a win for bipartisanship today. And that's all we have for you tonight on the Capitol Report. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Coming from the nation's capital, I'm Melina Weisskopf. Have a great evening. We'll see you back here tomorrow.